Now, as I told you earlier as well, Socrates is not a part of the official syllabus of UPSC. If you look at the UPSC syllabus, the Western political thought, amongst the thinkers, you will not find the name of Socrates. But then again, Socrates is a topic that appears very often in the UPSC examination. And that is why we will not skip it. We will study that in detail. If you are referring to, or you were, I hope now you would not, but if you refer to any other book or any other ready-made notes of PSIR that started from Plato and did not cover Socrates, please don't refer to that. Socrates is very, very, very important. Now, who was Socrates? Let's try to understand a bit about him to understand how did he impact other people. Now, first, let's understand Greece before Socrates. Greece before Socrates, I mean, what happened in Greece before Socrates was around? Greece before Socrates basically was a place where we had this divine rights theory. There was unlimited powers in the hand of the king. Whatever the king's thought was right. No questions asked to authority. Common people were kept away from knowledge. Common people were denied knowledge. All of that were the things that you used to see in Greece before Socrates came around. Now, Socrates is widely regarded as the most knowledgeable man of that era. He was a person who started asking questions. He was a person who started asking questions of very powerful and the rich people. Now, we will not go into history of in detail of Socrates, where was he born, etc. That is not important. About Socrates' life, there are two very important factors of his life that everyone is aware about. The first important factor of the life of Socrates was that he was defined as the wisest man in the world by Oracle. Who was Oracle? Oracle basically was a religious shrine in a place in Greece called Delphi. You don't have to remember that. Just remember this, that Socrates was claimed to be the wisest man in the world by Oracle. And the second was his death. His death became very famous. So basically what happened with his death was that Socrates started spreading this message to the common people of Athens that we should question the authority of the rulers. He started telling people that you should not just blindly trust the rulers. If the rulers ask you to do a certain thing, then you should question that. You as a common man have as much knowledge as the ruler might have. He wanted to tell the people that you are in no way inferior to the rulers of Greece. So whatever the rulers say, you have to question that. Now, when he started spreading that message, and the point with Socrates was he was a very good speaker. Now, the issue with good speakers is that they're able to convince people very easily. Now, this has no political connection, so please don't draw any comparison to our politics. But the reality is, the point about good speakers is that they can convince people very easily. So if I'm a very good speaker, I will be able to convince you about a lot of stuff that is not true. That is why I'm a good speaker, right? That is how the good speakers are. Now with Socrates also, he was a good speaker. If you look at history, in our history, a lot of people have become very powerful because of their speaking skills, because of their oratory skills. If you read about any, or if you see any documentary about Hitler, for example, you will see Hitler used to be a very, very, very powerful speaker. He was able to convince a lot of people about his ideas. Same with Socrates. Now, Socrates was not spreading lies, but because he used to speak very well, people were very impressed by him. That is when the royal families, the kings, the rulers of Greece, they started to worry. They started to worry about this idea that Socrates might lead a revolution against us. The people in Greece were worried that if they don't control Socrates, it would become problematic for them. Now, that is why Socrates was arrested. When Socrates was arrested, what happened was there was actually a charge on Socrates of raising, of basically spreading lies, asking people to revolt against the king, and in return, Socrates was given death sentence. He was actually given two options. One option was that you should leave Athens, you should leave Greece, go away. Second option was if you stay, you will be given death. Socrates chose death, and that is how his life ended. So his entire life ended because of his belief that you should challenge, or you should challenge the authority, you should question the authority. And he was killed for keeping this belief. Socrates himself, when he was praised as the wisest man in the world, did not take it very seriously. For example, I'll show you a very famous quote by Socrates. Socrates would engage with scholars and politicians, and he explains one encounter with a politician like this. This is what Socrates said. Socrates said, when I conversed with him, him means a politician. When I conversed with him, I thought this man seemed to be wise both to many others and to himself, but that he was not. Then he tried to show him that he thought he was wise, but he was not. Because of that, he disliked me. But I went away thinking to myself, I was wiser than this man. The fact is that neither of us knows anything beautiful or good, but he thinks he does not know when he and I don't know what I think I don't know. So it's a confusing quote, but don't worry. Basically, the idea is this. Let's look at this line, last one. What I do not know, I don't think I do. Means basically the idea that Socrates wanted to propagate is one who believes that I am very wise is not a wise man at all. Simple. That is a simple idea that Socrates had. That anyone who believes that he or she is an intelligent man, anyone who believes that I am a wise man is not a wise man at all. Only people who understand that there are limits to knowledge, only the people who know that they don't know enough are the only people who actually are knowledgeable and not the others. That is a very famous quote of Socrates. You don't have to remember the entire quote. Just remember this last line. Just this from here to here. What, I'll just change the color if you want. Yeah. So this, just remember this line. What I do not know, I don't think I do. Because what happens is a lot of times UPSC will just give you a quote in the question without even telling you who the person is behind this quote. The UPSC will just give you this quote and they will ask you to comment on this. So you have to remember that this is a quote by Socrates. Only then you would be able to go ahead and define what this quote is all about. Now, Socrates gave a few theories. One of his theories was the theory of knowledge. As we discussed, Socrates was a person who wanted everyone to challenge the authority. Socrates was someone who wanted everyone to challenge the existing norms, to challenge the royal family or the royal wisdom, etc. Socrates wanted everyone to aim for something called a good life. Remember this phrase. Socrates thought that only a good life or a virtuous life is worth living. Means even animals are breathing. So just because you're breathing, just because you're able to move, you're eating, you are sleeping, does not mean you are living a good life. There has to be a difference between animals and humans. Animals are not the same as humans. So if you're a human being, you are expected to do something more than the animals. What is it? You are expected to build a virtuous life or a good life for yourself. How would you make a good life? How would you make a virtuous life? You would do that by gaining knowledge. As per Socrates, the more knowledge you gain, the better you will become, the better your life would automatically be. According to him, you have to understand your soul, because it is within your soul that you can gain a lot of knowledge. So Socrates was a lover of knowledge. He thought that anyone who is not gaining knowledge is not living a complete life. Anyone who is not learning new stuff is not really exploring the beauty of life. If you are not looking into what new things can you learn, if you are not examining your soul from within, you are not giving any chance to yourself to live a better life, you are not in any way better than animals. So for him, gaining knowledge was extremely important. And again, knowledge is external but internal as well. Means look into your soul, look into your human nature, ask questions, and that is how you can gain knowledge. There would be many advertisements as well on TV. I don't know if you have seen those ads, that there are ads that propagate this idea that you should ask questions. If you don't ask, you will not get. For example, you go to some shop and you want to buy something, the shopkeeper says this is 2000 rupees. Unless you ask the person that can I get it at 1800, can I get this for 1500, obviously he or she will not himself reduce the price. But without you asking, obviously he is not going to reduce the price. He will not bargain against himself. So if you really want that he should reduce the price, if you really want that you should get a better deal, you have to ask. That is what Socrates also is looking into. He is also saying the same thing, that you have to ask questions to gain knowledge. The more questions you ask, the better are the chances of you gaining knowledge. Now, with Socrates, a word became very famous. This is a word that we will study about later as well. There's a word called dialectics. There's a word called dialectics. Now, dialectics is a word that means logical reasoning. Dialectics is a word that we'll study later as well with respect to other thinkers also, but this term started at the time of Socrates. Dialectics basically, simple term, means logical reasoning. Let's try and understand this. Let's assume there are two people, you and your friend. You have an idea that you believe that Sachin is the best batsman of all time. Your friend has an idea that Virat Kohli is the best batsman of all time. Now, the one you can do, you can fight over it. You can see whoever wins, that person will be the winner. That is what the sophist would want, right? Because the sophist said might is right. So if you are a sophist, you would want to resolve this by fighting. But for Socrates, fighting over it was not really the best way forward. For sophists, the best way forward would be to discuss. Meaning that if a person thinks Sachin is the best batsman, let him explain why does he think so. Let him tell why I think Sachin is the best batsman. Similarly, whoever thinks Virat Kohli is the best batsman, then let him explain. And if you are not a cricket fan, I'll give you another example. Someone thinks Messi is the best of all times. Other one thinks Ronaldo is the best of all time. So rather than fighting over, you should engage in debate. You should try to explain the other person your point of view. This method is called dialectics. This is the name of the method. So the name of the method is dialectics, means logical reasoning, making sure that you try and explain the other person your side of the story rather than forcing them to understand what you think is right. This was Socratic method. Socrates himself was a famous teacher. He used to teach people, even Plato, that we'll study later. Plato was nothing but a student of Socrates. So Socrates, when he was teaching people, used to engage in the same method. When he was teaching people, he used to ask people to go and discuss, debate what they think is right, only then arrive at the conclusion. This entire method is called the dialectics. Do remember that, so that people can come at a logical conclusion. That is how dialectics is. That You have a problem in your hand. The problem is who is the best player of all time. Two proposals will come up. Someone will say Kohli, someone will say Sachin. You make your assumptions, then you present the pros and cons. Like you make a presentation, you try to explain the other side, what exactly do you think is right, and then either choose between the two or you compromise between the two. You say, okay, both of these are good, or you choose between the two. So basically, the idea is you cannot force the other person to think what you are thinking. You have to explain them. This is called dialectics. Now, talking about knowledge only, Socrates believed there are two types of knowledge. Type one is more of opinion. Again, I'll use the same example. Let's assume that let's assume that I think Delhi is better than Mumbai. I know there are people here who are from Mumbai, but let me give this example. Let's assume that I think that Delhi is better than Mumbai. This is not knowledge. This is an opinion. This is an opinion. So as per Socrates, there are some knowledge that cannot be counted as knowledge. These are opinion because you think it is right. This is an illusion of knowledge. This is not a fact. Second type of knowledge is a fact which cannot be changed. For example, sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Simple. You cannot dispute that. You cannot say, no. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on the other side. No, it will not happen. If there is a fact that is unshakable, as per Aristotle, that is true knowledge. Only that is true knowledge. And that can only be understood by the method of dialectics. As per Socrates, again in simple terms, only when you deploy the method of dialectics, only when you deploy the method of communicating, engaging, discussing with the other person, only then you can arrive at true knowledge. That is the idea of dialectics. The other type of knowledge that you have is just opinion and nothing else. If you want to have true knowledge, you need to have a discussion with the other person. Socrates, because of his role, because of the theories that he gave, is also called as a father of ethics and a father of philosophy as well. See, one idea that you will see as we discuss other thinkers, it is true with Socrates, Plato, even Aristotle. All these thinkers are idealist thinkers. Now, when I say idealist thinkers, what I mean to say is, if you look at their political thoughts are always about what ought to be. Means how the world should be. They don't talk about how it is. They are not concerned with how it is. They are concerned with how it should be. They are concerned with what is idealist. For example, they will say that the best way forward should be that I should sleep at 10 p.m. You should wake up at 5 a.m. You should exercise every day. You should eat clean, etc. That is an ideal approach. This is an approach that you will see with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. All of them are idealist thinkers. Idealist thinkers again mean the people who always are more concerned with what should be. They are not concerned with practical or not, even if it is impractical. For example, when Socrates says that you should question the ruler, it is obviously impractical. How will you question the ruler? The ruler will not allow you to speak a word. The ruler will just order that take this person to the prison. But Socrates is not concerned with that. Socrates wants you to follow this ideal approach. He wants you to ask questions even though it may not be a practical approach. This is the problem with these thinkers. The starting few thinkers or the initial thinkers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle were concerned with what is ideal, not with what is practical. They were concerned with what should be, not concerned with what exactly is possible at this point of time. Another very famous quote that Socrates has given. This quote has been, by the way, asked by UPSC multiple times. It is a previous UPSC question. It has been asked multiple times by UPSC. This is a quote by Socrates. The quote says, unexamined life is not worth living. So how these questions are asked usually is, they will give you this quote and then they will say comment. That is how the UPSC asks these kind of questions. They will give you a quote. Either they will give you the name of the person who has spoken this, or they will not give you the name of the person when it is a very famous quote. Like this quote is very, very, very famous. So it might happen that in this quote, they might not even give you the name of Socrates. They will just give you the quote. Unexamined life is not worth living. Now, how do we answer this? I'll give you an answer to this as well. As I told you in the beginning, we will be discussing previous questions along with the answers so that we can understand how to write this. So this is the question that you should be able to answer based on whatever we have discussed about Socrates so far. Let's just recap whatever we have studied about Socrates. Socrates says that dialectics is the best way to achieve knowledge. You should be discussing things, you should be asking questions, you should be able to give points about your opinion. Socrates says a life is only worth living when you are actually aiming for a good life, a virtuous life. If you are just breathing, even animals are breathing. The only difference between you and animals is that you can gain knowledge. Animals cannot gain or aspire to gain knowledge. Only you can question. These are the things that you have to write here. Unexamined life basically means a life where you're not asking questions. Unexamined life means a life where you're not striving to achieve new knowledge. As per Socrates, that is not a life worth living. Now, this is how we can write this answer. Usually, these kind of questions are short note questions. So, in usual cases, this question, for example, would have a 150 word limit. 10 marks. In most cases, it would be 150 word long, 10 marks, and that is how we'll write. So we'll first define what this phrase is. If in case the question does not mention the name of the speaker, if the question just says unexamined life is not worth living, full stop, comment, then in the very first and in the answer, you have to first clarify who spoke this. Don't assume, first clarify. If it has already been given, then you don't need to clarify that. You can just start from here itself. That Socrates gives the meaning of true knowledge. Scholars before Socrates were focused on the ideas of properties of life, physical properties, not about gaining knowledge. Socrates suggested this is not what a life is. We should aspire to be living a good life, or you can also write virtuous life. As per him, to lead a good life, you should have knowledge of the good life. To understand what makes the difference between knowledge that is true and not. Remember, we just discussed about two types of knowledge. First type of knowledge, which is just opinion, which is not true knowledge. Second type of knowledge is a true knowledge. Socrates says you should be able to identify the difference between what appears to be knowledge and what exactly is true knowledge. Ultimate knowledge, that is the second kind, is unshakable. And for that, you have to follow the method of dialectics. And then you can say, in the end, that is how Socrates says knowledge of good life is necessary, and that is why he believes unexamined life is not worth living. So this is a model answer for this kind of a question. Now, in political science, PSIR, it is important to practice previous year question, and that is why we will be doing this. Because if you leave the IR part, in IR also dynamic part of IR, current affair based, apart from that, from the other part, the theory part, etc., you will see questions getting repeated. Like from political thinkers, questions do get repeated. For example, this quote, it has been asked multiple times by the UPSC. That is why you should be able to, you should at least try and see as many previous year questions as possible. And we will make sure of that in this class, that we'll take up previous year questions also along with solutions, So you understand how to write such answers. Also, Socrates, the knowledge that he gave, because Plato was a student of Socrates, you will see a lot of thoughts of Plato deriving from what Socrates had believed. In fact, Plato was so influenced by Socrates. The famous book of Plato that we will read about is called The Republic. In his book, The Republic, Plato's main character is Socrates only. Means Plato has written a book in which the main character, who is a hero or the protagonist, whatever you want to call it, is called Socrates only. So Socrates is doing this, Socrates is asking this, Socrates says that this is good, this is bad, etc. That was the influence Socrates had on Plato. That even after he was dead, Plato could never get over him. Plato in his entire book wrote about Socrates only and how Socrates actually would have wanted the state to be. We will read about Plato's theories now. Plato suggested something called the rule of the philosopher king that was also inspired by Socrates only.